So we had 3 people reach out to us that wanted to say a few words. Raymond Bunfy, Rob Marchand, and Chris also. Raymond, unfortunately, at the last minute could not be with us. And so I do have a short message from her that I will read towards the end. But Rob, if you are interested in unmuting and saying a few words.
Yeah. Yeah, well, first of all, it's been a great series of talks and yeah, really a fantastic showcase of sort of pollen work in Africa and how it's really evolving and evolving in some very practical ways. And I guess I've been fortunate enough to sort of interact, not directly, but sort of episodically with Eric over the years, you know, from my initial days as a aspiring palynologist, like Rahab, using graph papers to look at percentages, and then Tiliograph came along, and I'm not sure it saved all our woes, but it certainly allowed us to look at data in a different way. And then I was fortunate enough to work with Eric and John Keltner when I was working on the Latin American pollen database. And again, you know, I think Liddy mentioned that he was such a sort of kind and gentle soul, and certainly nothing but kindness and help throughout sort of my time of interacting with Eric. Either if it was you know, my very inane questions about Tiliograph and how to take data from Tilia into Tiliograph and how to do various bits of analysis, through to some of the Latin American pollen database work that I did as part of the BIOME project that Anne-Marie mentioned as one of the drivers, I guess, behind some of these pollen databases. So yeah, it's a great loss, but clearly that legacy, you know, continues in many, many ways, and it's been great to hear a number of those ways from the presentation so far.
Thanks, Rob. So Chris, you also said that you were interested in saying a few words.
Sure, yeah. So not knowing Eric quite as well, but knowing I've known of his work since I was a graduate student, and you know, at no point had I, as a grad student, had I imagined just Eric Grimm was this lofty name, and I remembered him specifically because of that last name. It really stuck with me. Being me having a unique last name and appreciating those things, and then, you know, eventually through interacting with the palynology community, specifically Anne-Marie, and having an opportunity to work on the African pollen database, going to that first meeting and knowing that Eric was going to be there, and Jack Williams was going to be there, and Rob Marchant and Will Gosling, and these sort of science rock stars that I knew, all in sort of one place. So it was a very Woodstock-like experience for me, in a way of just seeing, personally meeting people that had really influenced my work. So I got to say how much I appreciate all of you as well. What struck me about Eric is his kindness and his good humor, as how many of these workshops that he taught and how many times that he heard the same questions. And he always had such a good sense of humor about it. And the last time I hung out with him was in Amsterdam, and we went for a beer at a pub called the Linden. And he scanned the street for a pub and saw Linden, and he's like, there we go. And sitting there and talking with him, we talked about sort of our families and our backgrounds. We talked about fishing, but he talked about students a lot, and a handful of students that he was really excited about. And he showed just such enthusiasm and support for that. And I was really inspired by that. And I see that spirit alive in the community. And that's, yeah, something that I had to say to all of you about this.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I have a lot of good memories of those times in Amsterdam as well. So we actually, Rob Kanyanjui, you have your hand up. Did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, yes. What I just wanted to mention is that, like I said when I started my talk, is when I stopped now drawing the graphs and we did the dose entry of the data. Every time I was struggling to go each step, I was thinking in my head, I would like to meet this guy who has written the script that we must go through this to have a diagram, to make sense of the numbers we are working with. And when 2019 came and I got the chance to meet Eric, I was like, wow, I wrote to him several emails. We spoke via emails quite a number of times when I was asking a few questions when I got started. But when I met him and I saw the humor, like he doesn't look like so serious hard science kind of guy, and all the science we've applied over the years, it was really nice, and it was a great experience. Just like Chris saying, being in one room with all these big people, you read their papers and publications on pollen. It was nice and cool. And when I heard about him, his demise, and I remember people like Mohammed Umar, I remember people like the Western Africa, Mike in West Africa, and I'm like, I felt my heart crashing down, like I wish you can say something and say, oh, these people who have contributed so much, they need to stay for so long, Yeah, so I thought I should mention that because it was really a moment for me to meet Eric physically.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that too. I had a similar experience when I also met Eric that I'll probably talk about later. So in addition to those people that reached out ahead of time, and so still if those words inspired something that you want to say, raise your hand or just unmute yourself and let us know, because we do still have a few minutes left. I did get some written email comments as well from people that weren't sure that they were going to actually be able to join. And one of them was Raymond Bunfi, who has known Eric for quite a while now as well, through the development of the African pollen database and through other stuff. And she really wished that she could have been present so that she could speak here. And she just sent this really short message that she wished a cheerful, affectionate celebration, as simple, nice, sincere, and friendly as Eric was. And I thought that was really nice. Another comment that I got by email from someone that wasn't sure that they were going to be able to make it was Michelle Dinius, who said that it was the first and unfortunately the last time that she met Eric in Amsterdam. And I think that was the case for quite a few people that were there, and that she loved the great abundance of knowledge that he shared, and patience and willingness to help on big and small problems. And that's sort of a theme that I see emerging from a lot of the comments that we've gotten so far, and what other people have already said in this session, is that he just was very friendly and sincere and extremely helpful and enthusiastic, and that was something that inspired us, even if it was for like the first time meeting him, or if you had known him for a very long time. Another comment also, unless there's anyone else who has raised their hand or would like to speak, because I don't want to take up all of the airtime, was from another data steward who was trained in Amsterdam, and that, and actually, Dirk, you just raised your hand. Do you want to unmute and say a few words?
Yes. Maybe I can also see if I can put my my video on. Wait, hold a sec. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I have to say that I wasn't even very aware that Eric Grimm was so involved with the African pollen database, although it seems, of course, logically that he would. I know Eric mostly as an alumnus of the LRC, Limnological Research Center in Minnesota, and where I did my PhD in the early 90s. And of course, at that time, he already was an alumnus there, together also with Henry Lamb, here also present probably. and so that is how we occasionally interacted, yeah, and where of course I was also aware of his development of Tilia and TiliaPlot already from the time when it was still written in DOS. And we started using it as sort of first generation of paleocologists. And I was always trying to basically use it for non-pollen taxa. Yeah? Because of course I was working with aquatic invertebrates, fossil aquatic invertebrates like chironomids and ostracods and so on. Now I was very happy. Yeah, so probably also the way he inspired me most, maybe even more than Tilia, is through his studies with Sherry Fritz and Dan Engström on, let's say, on ecosystem dynamics, vegetation dynamics in the central Great Plains of the Dakotas. And this was, he was working on cores, sediment cores that were collected by Dan and Sherry, and where, of course, they had already done, let's say, hydroclimate reconstructions. And then he probably coordinated the counting of the charcoal and did the pollen analysis. And so from that deduced multi-decadal to century scale dynamics in fire and vegetation in the central Great Plains. It was published in Ecology, and that particular paper has been already an inspiration for me for over 20 years. I use it in my lectures, and also how I try to approach reconstructing landscape vegetation dynamics and fire in African sites. So I was very happy to meet Eric last time on the occasion of the INQUA conference in Dublin at the home of Henry Lamb. Yes, and so it was not so much later that he passed away. So great memories, great inspiration. We'll miss him.
Thanks, Dirk. That was really nice. I appreciate that. So we have one other person too who wanted to speak and share some thoughts, and that is Adele Julier. Adele, I'll let you speak.
Thank you. I'll just be really quick. I think, like a lot of people, I was a bit intimidated to first meet Eric because, you know, big superstar. But then he was just, I spent some time in Amsterdam in 2017 with him when I was writing up my PhD. And it really struck me how willing he was to just talk to like a completely stressed out, haywire PhD researcher who's finishing their PhD and everything is chaos. And he was still willing to talk to me, and he was just so calm. And I think that was really, it was a really welcome respite from my hectic writing up. And so, yeah, I think that was mainly what I wanted to say. I was so sad when I heard the news for his family as well, because you could just tell that he was such a gentle, humble, like lovely person that it's just a tragedy for paleoecology and his family alike. So yeah, I think I wrote that I hope his example stands as a model of how to be a good academic and a good person as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Adele. That was really nice. I'm glad you were able to join us. So, you know, I'll just kind of talk for another second in case there's anyone else who ends up raising their hand. But I think that brings us to the end of the time that we had on the schedule for personal stories. So there will be another time at the end of the third hour where we are going to do an informal toast and raise our glasses to Eric, where if you had another, short sentiment or a few words that you wanted to share, you certainly could do that. At this moment, I think what we have on the schedule is another sort of short comfort break. If you need to, get away from the computer for a second. Alternatively, if you want to stay and chat and discuss, feel free to unmute or use the chat function. Those are always available to you. And then we will pick back up at 3 o'clock UTC. So that would be in about 12 minutes with our final hour of talks, which will be 3 really exciting talks. One by Esther Gatumbi, followed by Rob Marchant, and then Louis Scott to finish us up before we end with our informal toast. So thanks again to everyone who has been here, through this time, and I hope that you stick with us through the break, and we will see you back in just a few minutes for another round of really exciting talks, and then the APD Data Steward meeting, which will follow the toast at the end of the next hour.